Alrighty. Take a little attendance here. Rabbit, snaps, celery, and JT does not want to register.
I thought I was going to be late.
Neither does Sally. Nope, you're just in time.
I had to tear myself away from Roach Road. Oh, just
I just got up.
into it.
I've just got out for a bit of a walk because we're only allowed an hour a day for exercise. It's going to be increased to 2 hours a day. But wearing a mask is not fun, I'll tell you.
Is that JT talking?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
I have trouble breathing because my God. Sorry, go ahead. Have a better mouse being down Roman Paint Station.
Time to get this story on the road.
Go alone.
So tonight's story is brought to you in part by MistLore.com, the Disney Desk Reference for the Disney dates, UrArchives.com for the surface history corresponding to the Disney dates, and the Convernian Calendar Converter, which is written by Brett Middleton of the Fuzzy Physics Institute for converting between Disney and surface time. As we progressed through the stories of the kings, we saw many changes in the Disney culture. We saw an austere lifestyle that began with King Rinaref, supplanted by greed and avarice that began with King Shomat. We saw a devotion to Yavo and a single faith, supplanted by diverse religions and religious beliefs numbering over 2,000, diminishing to just a handful by the end of Kareth's reign. Because of the writings of a martyred, self-proclaimed prophet named Gish, we saw their belief system being hijacked and steered away from the words and teachings of Yavo. And with King Jaren, Kareth's grandfather, we saw how the classes became more divided than ever before in their history. But the more violent factions in Disney decided to follow Yavo more closely and hope for a peaceful solution to their differing point of view. Gish's writings resulted in a conservative culture within Disney society, a culture that held the Autanti, or outsiders, with great disdain and contempt. This general attitude among the Disney was another contributing factor in the demise of a once great empire. We also looked at the Mi-Dis War, which occurred during the early 8th millennium of Disney history. It was a war that was, once again, started by violent factions who were vehemently against contact with the Autanti. This prejudice, though not held with the same violent emotions, was still felt by the majority of Disney society, a society that was very ethnocentric as well as xenophobic. These feelings and opinions remained prevalent up to the fall. We also learned about the origins of Yisha's journey ages, who created them and why. We learned about Agaris, the architect of the fall. His motives were not ethnocentric, nor did they stem from xenophobia. He was driven strictly by revenge. Revenge for being wrongly accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit. Revenge that drove him to commit genocide against his own people. A character flaw that would spell the end of an empire. Also, there are the beginnings of Atris, one of the heroes of the fall, the excavation of the great shaft, and of a friendship with Viovis, who would become one of the villains of the fall. We learned about a surface dweller named Anna, her life and how she came to find the cavern, and those same old Disney fears of the Autanti, the outsiders, and their possibly corrupting influence of on the Disney populace. We learned of Anna's time in prison, her learning the Disney language, and of Iovis' anger which started to burn so brightly against her over his beliefs in Denis elitism and supremacy over all other races. We learned of her trial and of her uncertain future in Denis. We learned how Anna came to live with Aitchis' parents, how Iovis, through his arrogance, assumed that Anna would not come to his first book celebration. We learned how Aitchis took exception to his friend's snubbing of Anna and, in turn, snubbed his friend for making him choose between the two. And finally, deciding to write an age with Anna. How, after living and working together, they fell in love, and how that love alienated Iovis, causing his anger to burn brighter than ever, and bring an end to his friendship with Aitchis. Tonight, we will take a brief respite from the Book of Tiana, and learn the origins of a popular place in Denis. As an aside, a large portion of tonight's story was written by Simpson of the DRC. It has been summarized and rearranged somewhat, but the integrity of his report remains. Also used were Cyan's design notes on a particular age which will become evident as I tell the story. There is an old tree in the Jateri district. It was created as far back as the early second millennium in Denis history. The Watcher Sanctuary was built in the late 4000s and dedicated to the Watcher, who had died in the mid-4000s, in the Denis year of 4606 to be exact. The tree was built long before the Watcher was born. No one at the DRC seems to know exactly what it was for, though the best guess is that the tree was built early on as a representation of the Denis that had come here, the new tree. Many of the Watcher's prophecies deal with the tree. Someone, whose name has become lost in the annals of time, built the Watcher Sanctuary with the tree as its focus. It appears that the building became an upper-class lounge or sitting room or pub, if you will. It was a place where the intellectuals would come and discuss the philosophies and politics of the day. Though there was some homage being paid to the Watcher and his thoughts and ideas. This sanctuary stayed successful, even though its ownership changed, seemingly as frequently as the philosophies and religious views of the people. It wasn't until its last owner came along that the thing really took off in popularity. The last owner did some renovations to the building. Unfortunately, this was right before TheFall. Oddly, there is no outside access to the building. Unless one has access to a linking book, there is no means of getting inside, which would explain why the books in the building were never taken or destroyed. Members of the DRC are not sure if it was sealed by the last owner or if it had always been this way, but the best guess is that it has always been this way. The Watcher spoke quite a bit in his work Words about someone known as the Grower. The Grower is prophesied to do a number of things, and, it seems, there were numerous interpretations of the Grower. Some saw this person as little more than a great lord or king, while others saw this person as a superhuman miracle worker, godlike, conquering time, space, dimension, and everything else. The views on the Grower were as varied as you can imagine. Now, fast forward to the Denis year of 9320, 1664 AD on the surface, the year that the English scientist and polymath Robert Hooke discovered Jupiter's great red spot, the year that Gazzetta di Mantova was first published in Mantua, Italy, and has since become the world's oldest private newspaper. It was the year the Dutch colony of New Netherland surrendered the city of New Amsterdam to an English naval squadron, who promptly renamed the fledgling city to New York, after the Duke of York, who later became King James II. And 2 years after the dodo became extinct. There was a Grand Master of the Guild of Writers who was, for reasons unknown, cast out of the guild. Finding himself unemployed, though his personal wealth was such that he didn't have to work, he looked for something to do to occupy his time. We don't know if he bought the Watcher Sanctuary before or after he was let go from the guild, only that purchase it he did. This defrocked, for lack of a better term, guildmaster also opened an art gallery on the mall on Agura. In his gallery, he featured some original work, as well as works from the various outside cultures. His name was, of course, Kadish. Kadish came from a wealthy family, and, as a result, he had the money needed to start his own business after being kicked from the guild. Obviously, he was looked down upon for his removal from the guild, and, as a result, his store fared poorly. However, with help from his father and the passing of time, the store began to gain in popularity, and the elite began to visit it more often. Eventually, the store held a variety of artistic pieces from both Denis and outside ages, pieces that were eventually well known for their value. However, little known to most of the society, the real success was coming from Kadish's writing of illegal black market books. The store was more of a front than anything, albeit a successful one, where both the elite and poor could come for book requests. Kadish viewed himself as the grower, as the one the Watcher had prophesied about. As a result, he modified the pub to honor not only the prophet, but himself as well. He seemed to be intent on fulfilling as many of the prophecies as he could, so he built this puzzling path of the shell to the tree, brought the Arcana book here to the pub, as Kadish was the engineer behind part of its remodeling. Brought the Anone book there, and claimed that it allowed him to travel through time, back to the Denis homeworld as it was, as it is, and as it would be. Kadish claimed he wrote the book. Though we don't know when the Age of Arcana was written, or by whom, we do know that it was written along with the ages of Erduna and Urgera for the Guild of Caterers as a source of food for the Denis, specifically as a source of various grains. The harvesters would ride out on their rails and sail over the seas of grain with their harvesting wings deployed, resembling large, low-flying birds. When Grandmaster Kadish purchased the Age of Arcana, he made several modifications to one of the processing facilities that was serviced by two different harvesters. First, he sealed the entrance to the facility for one of the harvesters, then destroyed the rail system for the other harvester while it was still deployed. Apparently, he didn't want anyone to accidentally find out what it was he was doing. Next, he modified the grain processing facility to change the method, presumably, of processing into pellet form, and the place to where the new form was to be delivered. He found that by processing the grain according to a specific formula, The pellets seemed to feed the bioluminescent algae in the lake. By the time of Kadish's birth, the Dini had been in the cavern for more than 9 millennia, and the light levels in the lake were not as great as when the Dini first arrived on Earth. And all of these things were done to fulfill the prophecies, that the grower would bring light to the cavern. Even the times of Dini were significant because the Watcher claimed to see visions of the past, present, and future. As a result, the Watcher wrote what he saw, never knowing if it would occur in the future, had already occurred in the past, or was occurring as he wrote. People flocked to the place, the Watcher's Pub. Not only was it the only way to travel through time, but Kadish himself was the only one who could solve the spiral path of the shell and access the tree. In fact, he would demonstrate his ability to anyone who wanted to come and watch. Nightly challenges were held to see if anyone else could access the room. It seems no one ever did. Further confirmation of Kadish as the grower. Kadish bragged that the Watcher clearly spoke of how to solve the room in his prophecies, and that anyone could find the solution there. Easy to say when you built the thing. Either way, good luck reading through all those and figuring out anything, let alone the solution to some kind of weird Dini puzzle. Now, sometime in the 9390s, oh, and one more thing about the path of the shell. Dini had the people convinced that when they linked to Anane, they could travel through time. Dini as it was, as it is, and as it will be. However, the histories show that Garterne, their homeworld, actually, Anane is supposed to be their homeworld of, not of Dini, but their homeworld of Garterne, as it was, as it is, and as it will be. However, as it will be indicates it would be past the current time of the visitation during the 9300s. However, we know from the histories that Gartene actually reached its point of total destruction back around the year 3000 of Dini history. Anyways, on with the story. Sometime in the 9390s, between 1734 AD, which was about 10 years after Pedro de Rivera inspected the province of New Spain, where his engineer, Francisco Alvarez Ibiero, was one of the first to map the Guadalupe Mountains. In 1744 AD, which is about 4 years after Handel wrote The Messiah, Kadish decided to create an age where he could store his considerable wealth. He called it Kadish Telesa. Now, some students of Dini history have put this event closer to 93-95, which would be about 1739 AD on the surface. Afraid that someone might steal some of his riches, he devised a series of ingenious puzzles to be solved before being able to enter his vault. Apparently, he was confident enough in the difficulty of the puzzles that he even left clues as to their solution inside his own gallery. And in this age, he also built a mansion for him and for his family. Because of his connections with the underworld and the black markets, Kadish had a fairly good idea of Agaris and Viovis's plans to end Dini. He heard bits and pieces, and though most thought the rumors to be ridiculous, Kadish began to buy into them. As a result, he quietly began to prepare an age where he would be able to safely go if the fall did occur. and over the years Kadish began to store his most valuable possessions in that age. And over the years the age began to consume him, as did his possessions. He carefully constructed the puzzles to prevent others from being able to get to the age, although hid many of the clues, as I said, in his store. But part of that reason for hiding the clues in the store was that should family need to try to get to the age. Eventually, he became almost mad, as some called him, completely consumed with his possessions and his age that hid them. However, when the fall occurred, he was safe. Unfortunately, his family was not. When the explosions hit, Kadish immediately ran to his safe age and, forsaking his family, friends, etc. Though he presumed they would show up someday, they never did. I guess there was another linking book for the family to use, because if he was expecting them to come to his gallery, well, that'd be kind of difficult since he cut the power to the only doors that gave access to the gallery. And as a result, he lived the remaining years of his life in his age with his possessions. Unfortunately, his family was not. When the explosions hit, Kadish, as I said, ran to his safe age, forsook everybody, and though he presumed they would show up, they never did. And as a result, he lived the remaining years of his life in his age with his possessions. Now, the redwood-like trees of the age have been growing unabated and untended for over 2.5 centuries. The once immaculate mansion stands in ruins as the trees have encroached and engulfed the building with only a small portion that is still accessible. The same is true of the courtyard that once contained a massive and beautifully groomed garden area. Anyway, it seemed that Kadish ran the Watcher's Sanctuary up to the end. Obviously, at some point, we know he died, and we've all seen the remains of the poor guy, which was an odd end for a guy that seemed to have had so much. Had a book right there, but didn't use it. But that is another story. Please join us next week as we learn about the birth of a sickly child, a master forger, and a philosopher. The end.
Yeah, good story out there as always.
Thank you, RK.
Well, you're welcome, Cave Woman, Caver, Axe, JT, Rabbit, Kiwi, and thank you all for coming tonight.
Very good, thank you.
That was very interesting, RK. Thank you. Can I ask you a question now?
Always.
You said there's no way out of Watcher's Cove, but behind one of the curtains, I think there's some stairs that lead out.
That I don't know.
But
Is that from...
New Age people put the books there because they disappeared.
Did you find the stairs in one of Larry's tours?
No, because we didn't look for them. We went to Magic Rock, Green Tree
Well, there's like 3 stairs down into the rooms behind the main area that are curtained off. But according to the DRC, there was no external access to the pub from the city.
I remember from last year's tour, we were running around outside the pub, on a whole tour or whatever, on that tour, and there was a set of stairs that did not have convention.
Like I said, I don't know. I'm reading from the DRC documentation, and the DRC said there was no external access to the pub. Now there may have been stairs that were modeled that were not in, speaking out of character for a moment. There may have been stairs that were modeled with the idea of having external access to the pub at some point, but then the storyline was changed that there was no external access, so they just walled off all those rooms. And yes, Axe, Rawa is Jewish.
I don't think we're talking about this. Richard Watson.
Now, Rawa is Richard A. Watson, and he is the architect of the history and the language of Denis. Yes, very talented guy. I'm sorry, what was that?
Ali is quite a character as well.
Dal Ah, gotcha.
Can anybody tell me why there is a barrow stone outside the library that leads to the pyramids and these collections behind the ceiling?
No. It was, I was just gonna say, the borrow stones that we find have been left behind by Yisha, and it's part of telling us the story for her first journey. That sounds logical.
They borrow them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Somebody's going cooking. I'm going to go find out what he's going to upset about. Hang on a minute. He's raising hell. I don't know why.
I can hear him moving.
Well, shall we adjourn to the back tier for some chit chat?